Good day, all. So, whether you probably don't know the woman that I'm about to speak of, ethelfarslow. If you're from the Perth County area, you would likely know this lady. In any case, I'm not making this video. I'm not complaining about um, ethelfarslow. Um, God rest her soul. She has passed away, and it's working on a decade since we lost her, so I feel I can make this video. So, at the time, she had to be already in her late 70s, um, perhaps even early 80s. In any case, I'm a very compassionate person, and she was living in um, a, a house that she was getting kicked out of, and she could not find a place to go. I owned a little cottage down by Turkey Point at the time, and I was taking visitation of my kids about half of the week, and there was an extra bedroom, and I said, listen, I'll let you move into my place under one condition, essentially just one condition, and that condition was that um, I prefer to live by myself. And I told her, uh, I was very straight up with this lady that, this is temporary, um, at most a year, and I'm gonna charge you next to nothing for staying down there because I want you to save um, as much of your pension check as you can so that you can get your own place. So, if I recall, I'm pretty sure that I was charging her $200 a month, and that was with all the utilities included. Um, when she moved in, there was two and a half bush cords or more of very well seasoned hardwoods, and I had two 400-pound propane tanks, one of which was full. So there was 400 pounds of propane also on site the first winter that she moved in. Anyways, the very first week, and I'm telling these stories, like I said, I'm not complaining about this lady. It's humorous, really. Some of the things that she did and how a person gets to that age and is oblivious to certain things, I have no idea. In any case, the first week, she was only down there about a week, and I went down after I was done looking after the kids. And I had a really beautiful, probably 40-inch or so, or 42-inch drop leaf, a round drop leaf oak table. And this table was pristine. There was not a mark on it. And I went down the first week, and on my side of the table, there's a bunch of cut marks into the table. And I said to her, like, why is the table all marked up? And she says, well, so she was cutting her bread directly on the tabletop. And later on, she also put a whole bunch of cigarette burns in the top of this table. So, anyways, still functional as a table, but to me, like, she destroyed this table. So, there was a really nice little sawmill down in the area. Now, keep in mind, this was 15 years ago or so. And I stopped in, and I wanted some either bur oak or white oak 4x4s, and I just figured they'd be expensive, so I was just asking how much. Well, they were only $3 or $4 a piece, I forget, maybe $4 a piece. And even back then, I mean, that's extremely reasonable. I said, yep, you know, cut me up 40 of them. And I got like 40 of them. And I stickered them and stacked them nice at my place. So this is going to lead into the essentially firewood territory here. So I realized she was down there full time. When I was down there, I was down there about half of the week, and I would burn about a bush cord of firewood a year. Now I understand she's an older lady. Maybe she likes it a little warmer, but the thing is, I don't even know if it was the end of February. Like, I went down one weekend, and after, maybe 4 or 6 weeks, and the firewood is pretty well gone. Like, she went through it so fast that I asked her, I said, like, did you sell some of the firewood? And, well, no, the thing is, she liked it hot, and, I'd be in my t-shirt and I'd be sweating. It'd be 28 degrees in the house. I honestly thought she was selling firewood, but she was basically burning the wood stove wide open and going through firewood like no tomorrow. So that first winter, she burned up all the firewood even before the burning season was over, and used up the 400 pounds of propane. So I had these oak 4x4s outside, and I also had a really nice birch pole outside, about a 16 footer or 18 foot, like 6 or 8 inches on one end, 4 on the other. Really nice birch pole that I had plans for. And I went down one weekend, and the birch pole and it was nice and straight, beautiful birch pole. I went down one weekend, and the birch pole's gone. And I also noticed there was a bunch of 4x4s missing off of this stack of oak 4x4s. So once again, I kind of thought maybe she had sold some of the 4x4s, but I said to her, what happened to my birch pole? Well, she cut it up and burned it. And I said, did you sell some of the 4x4s? And she says, no, I've been burning them. So she was cutting up these milled oak 4x4s and burning them in the wood stove. Thankfully, I didn't pay a lot for them. I mean, these days, I was ticked off, but I mean, these days, I would have been pretty ticked off. And I don't know what she was thinking. Chainsawing up dimensional lumber and just burning it. All right, and so her dog, she would give the dog maybe once a day a piece of buttered bread. And I did tell her as well, like, don't let the dog, I don't want you guys in my room when I'm not here. But anyways, the dog would, eat half of the piece of bread, and there'd be pieces of dried bread all around the house and on my bed as well, which she wasn't even supposed to be in there. But anyways, I go down the next weekend or so, or one weekend, and she's ripped the siding off of one side of the house. And now I was going through a divorce and stuff at the time, and I didn't have any money. And anyways, I asked her, I said, like, why did you rip the siding off of the side of the house? And she says, well, the mice were getting in. So, I don't doubt there were mice coming in the house, because there's dried pieces of bread, like it's a smorgasbord for bugs and mice in there. So I guess you rip the siding off the side of the house. So some of the other stuff that she did, really beautiful. I had a couple of really beautiful white trillium at the edge of the bush line down there, and they were beautiful. I loved walking by and looking at them. And I don't know, everyone should know. I don't know about the red variety, but I know it is illegal to dig up white trillium. They're very biome sensitive. They need very specific soil. That's why you're not supposed to dig them up, because if you move them, they're dead basically. Anyways, I went down one weekend and she has dug up the white trillium and brought them into the house, and she was just, you know, what she used as a pot for these white trillium was a half of a emptied out cantaloupe husk. So she had eaten the cantaloupe out of it and was using it as a pot for these trillium. So, I told her, I said, well, you do realize that's a federal offense. Excuse me. It's a federal offense to dig up white trillium, and I was pretty ticked about that one too, because there was no point in even trying to put them back, really. I forget what I did. But anyways, she dug up the white trillium and put them in a half a cantaloupe husk in the window. Oh, goodness. And now keep in mind all of these stories, and she was only down there about a year. So as I said, I was going through a nasty divorce, and it just got to the point where I had to sell my house. So I listed it with the local realtor. And I saw my realtor down in Turkey Point one day, and she says, well, can I talk to you? I said, sure, what's going on? And I had my house up for sale, obviously. She says, well, Ethelfarslow, I've showed your house a couple of times, and she went off on the people that were looking at your house. Like, she chased them off. Like, when I say she went off, I mean she was pretty much yelling at these people, like, it's all a mistake, this house is not for sale. And she just failed to realize that, I mean, I wanted to hang on to the place. It was a beautiful lot. The cottage was pretty rough, yes, but I was just in a situation where I had no choice. And when I talked to Ethel, she just said, well, I told her, I said, this is supposed to be temporary. I'm only charging you a couple $100 a month. And I noticed, you're not even looking. And you're chasing away people that might want to buy my place. And she says to me, well, I've decided I like it here, and I'm staying. Okay, now I got to think, because there is a lot more stories than this. The crock pot story. This woman, you know how dogs can eat just about anything because they're so used to eating basically spoiled food that their stomachs get conditioned to eating garbage, rotten food. So she had a crock pot a large crock pot that she would fill up to the brim, and it wasn't until after I got rid of her, and thankfully I noticed fairly quickly that here's a crock pot that's plugged into a light timer. And the timer was set for, it'd come on at 10 o'clock in the morning or whatever, so that it was up to temperature by, in the afternoon or whenever she decided to start eating. But it would go off at night at about 6 o'clock. And, fully cool off at night. And she would eat out of this crock pot for several days. So however long the contents of this crock pot lasted, 4 days, 5 days, whatever. I can't imagine how she wasn't perpetually sick to her stomach. The kind of stuff that this woman used to eat was absolutely horrendous. If I had to put even a spoonful of this concoction that she had in this crock pot, I'm quite sure I would have vomited pretty well instantly. But yeah, crock pot on a light timer, um, and no refrigeration at night. Um, yeah. Now, the other thing is her smoking habits. I smoke, but there are some unwritten rules about smoking that everybody knows, and one is, you don't smoke in bed. You get laying down in bed, you get sleepy. I mean, they had to start making mattresses basically fireproof because there were a lot of house fires because people were smoking in bed. But the other rule about smoking is that you empty your ashtray in the morning when you know it's dead cold. And I was down there one time, and she just took her ashtray and pitched it in the garbage. And I had to explain to her that, like, you're going to burn the house down doing that. And I know that when she did live in a trailer for a time, and the trailer burnt down, and I've got to say that the smoking habits of hers that I witnessed, I can completely see how and why the trailer burnt down. I'm sure she never realized it or felt that it was her fault, but I'm quite positive that chances are it was of her own doing. And she used to keep. You used to be able to get cigarettes. Used to come like in a collectible tin once in a while, and she always had one of these tins, and she would put it on top of her ashtray. In her mind, essentially to keep the ashtray from starting on fire, but she didn't realize that there are still the recesses in the ashtray where you can put your cigarette. So the air, if the thing is, the bottom of her steel cigarette container was absolutely black. Like, there were times that her ashtray, in fact, I believe, if I recall, there was even a burn ring eventually on the top of this oak table that I'm talking about. So that ashtray had been burning hot enough that it left a mark on the table. Okay, so in the last, and I'm sorry, but I'm like I said, I'm not complaining about this woman, but it's just incredible some of the stuff that she used to do. So I had a really nice, what they call a cabin stove. They're kind of smaller, like shorter, but the firebox is longer. They're really nice, super nice. You don't have to cut up your firewood as small. But anyways, it was a full cast iron cabin stove. And I show up one weekend, and she used to keep her kettle on top of the stove. And I come in one weekend, and she's filling up the kettle on top of this burning wood stove, okay? And I said to her, you can't do that. I said, don't do that anymore. Do not fill up the kettle on top of the stove. Oh, why? Why? And I said to her, I said, that is a cast iron wood stove. I said, if you spill water, you're gonna crack that stove and fuck that, pardon my French, frig that stove up. Like, you'll ruin that stove. If you spill water on it, it'll crack. It's cast iron. Oh, no, it won't. No, it won't. And she says, well, I'd like to talk to someone who knows about steel, about that one. I said, you know what? You go ahead and you talk to whoever you like. And I said, whether you believe me or not, the thing is that's my wood stove, and I'm telling you not to do it. So anybody who knows anything about cast iron, if you pour cold water on a hot piece of cast iron, there's a pretty good chance it's gonna crack. And I don't know how long she had been doing this, filling up the kettle on top of the stove. It's a wonder it wasn't cracked already. All right, well, there are a couple other little stories, but not as, I guess, humorous as the ones I've already, told. But I'd really have to think about it. But what a lady, and I care for her. Don't get me wrong. I was not trying to do her any wrong. But you can't just decide you're gonna stay at someone's place. Like some of the stuff she used to get into her head, I can't figure out. But anyways, guys, I hope you found this amusing, and there sure are some characters out there in life, and I kind of hope you guys don't come across any. But yeah, that's the story, the ethelfarslow story, or most of it. Take care, all.